So in this video, I wanted to take you through some of my most used tips and hacks based on the new Cursor 2.0 release, as lots of things have changed in the last month. I have taught thousands of people how to use it effectively through my Cursor course and my enterprise training for development teams. So I've also got a free starter kit you can use to save you days of development time. It's got Next.js, ShadCN, Clerk for Auth, PostgresDB with Neon. Thanks to Recraft for sponsoring this video. They're pretty much the Cursor of graphic design. I think you're going to like it. Check it out later. These few interface shortcuts are going to save you a lot of time and make you feel like a complete pro. Command or Control B opens and closes your sidebar here. And in your sidebar, you have your file structure. So this is just like your Finder window. It's where all your files are in a project. Control or Command J opens up and closes your terminal. So your terminal is basically where you work with your file system, where you run servers, where you run commands, and it's where a lot of your agent is going to do its work. If you like to use tools like Claude Code or Droid or OpenCode, you'll actually be able to run them in here as well alongside Cursor, which I often do. Command-Shift-B will open your browser for testing, and Control-E switches you between the editor and the agents window. So just switch over them. First thing you want to do when you start a new project, go up to settings, and you might have various different MCPs enabled. The thing with MCPs is they're very useful, but they take up a huge amount of your context window. So I generally turn all of these off at the start of a project and just switch them on as I need them to make sure they're not taking up too much context and my AI is getting confused. I'll generally leave browser automation switched on here. In the general settings, you want to make sure as a must your completion sounds are turned on. We've all been guilty of opening up Instagram or going and looking at YouTube and watching a video like this while our agent has been running, but it's important that it pings you to notify you it's done so you can keep moving forward. In your rules and commands section, I often use Claude Code inside Cursor as well as using the Cursor models themselves. So it's nice to take advantage of the commands that you use for both. So you can set the import Claude commands here to make sure that any Claude commands are included. So when creating and using rules are basically like extra prompts that get initiated or used by Cursor at certain times. They can be automated, you can manually add them. To be honest, I find them a little bit hit and miss. They don't always work for me. And sometimes what people do is they create these huge rules files that don't necessarily apply, and it kind of bloats the context window. So what I tend to do is just start projects without a lot of rules. And as I progress and see that there's a common issue or something happening over and over, I'll add my own specific rule. And probably the thing I will use the most is user commands. These are commands that I create. They get stored to my Cursor folder and they get used for every single project that I create. As an example of a command here, I will run a package health check. This will do a high-level scan of my node modules or any packages that I have to make sure that there's not any security concerns or upgrades needed. And I can run that simply by typing / and then package health check, or I can even get the agent to run that for me by referencing it. So creating your own commands is super simple. Just go here, type / in the input box, hit create command, enter the command name and whatever prompt that you want to add to it. In this case, it's this one here. And there you go. Every time you hit /, it'll be listed here in your commands list. And you can use those across Claude Code as well. Okay, so another cheeky Cursor tip, which isn't actually a Cursor tip, is I will often use Claude Code alongside Cursor. Lots of people have trouble spending way too much money on all of the different subscriptions they have. Generally, what I do is I run the $20 Cursor plan, and then I also run the $20 Claude Code plan because I really like both tools. I use Cursor way more, but I do like Claude in terms of its agentic abilities. If there is anything that experience has taught me, it's that you can build the most useful apps and agents out there, but if the design sucks, it's just not going to get noticed. So a tool I find myself reaching for more and more these days is Recraft. So Recraft is pretty much like Cursor for graphic design and image editing. So it's generated this image, but I need some kind of an SVG or vector if I want a real logo. And this was something I struggled with loads before until Recraft came along. I can just click on this here and there is a vectorize button, or I can do it here in the chat. So I'm just going to hit this and now I've got a full SVG version. I can add in the color scheme or style here, and then every generation is going to look exactly like how I want it to. Recraft has pretty much replaced a load of different editing tools I had. It helps me remove a background or even change it. I can make mock-ups for product designs. and I can upscale any low-res images that I need. I highly recommend Recraft. If you want to support the channel and check them out, check out the link in the description down below. Most of us have different languages or frameworks that we're used to working with to get things done, and we need to prime the AI to let them know exactly how we like to work. So you can create a simple command for this if you've got the same stack that you use. A simple one here is Next.js, ShadCN, and Lucid Icons. I call this the Rob front-end stack as a command, and I would just basically hit this, run this, and Composer would go install and set that up for me. If you really want to speed things up for your client work or your own projects, I suggest having your own template set up with everything ready to go. I've got my own one here called Launch Kit Core. It's completely free and it's got a full set of instructions here to get you up and running in just a few minutes. So I would just use this template here, create a new repository, give it a title, hit Create Repository, copy the URL here, open a new window, hit Clone Repo, paste in the URL address, open up your terminal and just type in npm install. So it's going to install everything you need. It's got auth already set up for you, ready to go. So just go to Clerk and then sign up, create an account, go to your dashboard. Clerk is free to use until you hit a huge amount of users. So highly recommend it. So then just click Create Application. I'm going to call this Boostling Title Gen, Create Application. Make sure you've got Next selected here. And just copy your API key snippet here. Create an env file by just hitting create. In our file explorer over here, just right click, click new file. We're going to call this the .env file, and we're going to paste in our Clerk information there. So make sure to keep these secret, and we're going to paste in our API information here. Don't freak out, I'm going to delete this before I put the video up. So when we want to run our application, we generally have to run a server. So the great thing about Next.js is it has a server built in. So we open up our terminal application, and then usually what we do is we type in npm run dev, and that will actually run a development server. So if I run this like this, you'll see this whole terminal now is taken over with this running process, and it's running on localhost 3000. So we can use the shortcut Control-Shift-B, and that opens up our browser. So this lets us see our localhost right here. Okay, so tips for dealing with errors. Now I put this error in here on purpose. If you follow through README, it tells me you need to generate the Prisma client. And very quickly, Prisma is how Next.js communicates with our database, which is going to be a Postgres NeonDB database. The reason I love to use something like an ORM like Prisma or Drizzle is because the entire database schema or design of your database is contained within this folder here. So you can see it's listed. So that means that our AI can understand how the database works. And if it wants to make a change, it just has to read through the schema, set up that change, and tell us to run a migration, or it can do it itself. So it will then be ported over to our database. So this is much better than trying to work with an MCP or do any other kind of process. It's just a very clean way for our AI to understand the database, and that's really important. So that's a big tip. Okay, so before I actually get to solving this error, another thing that's important is that our AI understands fully our code base. So how do you prime your project? So you need to remember, every time that you hit a new chat window here or start a new conversation, the AI is just appearing inside your code editor with no clue as to what's going on or what you want. You need to start to provide some context to help it out. We talked a little bit earlier on about priming and why that's important. Priming being that we let the AI understand the makeup of the project. When you press this new chat conversation, it's going to be a new AI stepping into a code base that it's never theoretically seen before. So how do we give it a head start? If you're used to using Claude Code, it's got this handy little tool here called /init. So if I run /init, Claude will make its way through all these files here on the left-hand side, get an understanding of the project, and generate a claude.md file, which is a quick markdown summary of how the project works. You also have the concept of an agents.md file, a gemini.md file. These are all very similar. Now, the great thing about Cursor is it's indexing and understanding your code base constantly from the minute you start adding files. And this is called Codebase indexing. It's something that you need to make sure you have switched on here, and it's in indexing and docs. You can, of course, create your own agents.md or claude.md. if you are working with Claude Code, but this will actually work independently in the background. In this doc section here, if you're using the latest version of Next.js or any other type of project, it is a good idea to add in the most recent documentation here. Another tip, you need to remember the cutoff window for your models, and typically that can be up to 6 months ago. So if there's recent versions or releases of any of the packages or plugins that you use, your model is not going to have an understanding of how that works. So you need to give it updated information. Either have the model search for the documentation by just telling it to actually search with that keyword, or make sure that you've got the docs added in here and you tell the model to reference that. I wouldn't leave it to chance. I'll always say search for recent documentation, or even better, I will take a specific URL or a specific page that has relevant information to, let's say, setting up Clerk with Next.js, and pasting that in to the chat window so the model knows exactly what it's dealing with. If you're looking to lead in this AI space and build apps and automations without writing the code, check out my course and community at switchdimension.com. We'd love to have you in there. So these are just a small collection of tips, by the way. I would love to get your favorites if you can share them in the comments down below so I can learn, and others as well. And while you're down there, loads of people have told me they've been watching my videos for months and didn't even realize they hadn't clicked subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button, it would be a big help. Okay, so back to dealing with errors. So you see we've got this error popped up here on a screen for Next.js. Now, this is basically a console error. So a console error is going to appear in the front end in the browser. So if we just click this little button here to see our developer tools, you'll see there's this little console tab here. You'll see these errors showing up in red here. So that's something that's showing up in the browser. So what I can do is just copy this here and paste it into the chat and let the agent know what the problem is so it can resolve it. Or Next.js is really handy. I can just press this little copy button here and then paste it directly in like that. If the error doesn't exist in the browser or the front end and it's just coming through in the terminal, I would just copy this down to the end and then also just paste that directly into the chat here as well. So you can see my little prompt here: review the console logs of the browser and running terminal for any errors. And we want to add the context by hitting the @ symbol here. And we can see that we can add in the browser for context. Again, I'm using Composer because it's super fast. Now you can see in the chat log here that because Composer and Cursor now have a full understanding of the code base, they were very rapidly able to find out what the problem was and then ran the step to generate the Prisma client. Now we've 2 predictable errors left over. So I want to show you another way that you can actually save some costs and speed up working with AI. I can jump straight in and say, add the context of the README and just tell it what I needed to do. So in this case, I'm just asking Composer to go and check out the README for the next steps in terms of setting up our database. So cool, I just need to follow the instructions here. We're going to use Neon in this case. You can use Supabase or whatever you want. So I'm going to log in, create a new project, pick whatever region you want and click create. Click this connect button here, click on connection string and let's find Next.js. Click on the little .env here and let's just copy that snippet. And we're just going to paste that into our .env file alongside our clerk key. So back in Cursor, I tell it I've got it set up and I'm just going to hit go. Now, if I go back over to Neon again, you'll see that the post table is set up. I didn't touch anything. Cursor did all that for me. And it basically did that by running Prisma generate. So it's worth looking into how Prisma works. You're going to be using it a lot, or Drizzle as well is comparable. And if I create a little post here and save it, hit refresh here and boom, you can see that it's been added in. Okay, so context management is super important. So another tip is to keep an eye on this little context manager down here. So you'll see we've got 29% of our 200K context window used here. Typically, I will do my best not to go over 60%. I find when you go over that 60% mark, even though you've got 40% left in your context window, it starts to get a little bit confused. There's too much content in there for it to manage. Even when you're dealing with a model like Gemini, which has a huge context window, it still has this same kind of issue. It does well at remembering instructions at the start of the context window and at the end, but not so much the stuff that's going on in the middle. So for that reason, I try to find natural breaks to start a new conversation. So if I'm finished this little piece of work, like setting up the project, now would be a natural time for me to start a new conversation. So I have a couple of options for doing this. I can just hit this new chat up here, or if I'm in the agents window, I can just start a new agent. If I'm working on a feature and there has been a lot of over and back in terms of the conversation, and I haven't managed to achieve what I wanted in the context of one conversation, what you can do is summarize or compact the conversation to bring the best parts of it with you into the next one. I don't really use that often, but it's handy to know. So just hit slash, and down here in terms of actions, you can see there's a summarize button here, and it's going to go and summarize our chat context. Okay, so one question I get a lot is, what models do I like to use? And that's important. So it changes depending on what comes out. I generally test them all. You can see that on the channel. So what I'm using mostly at the moment is, I just love Composer. That's Composer 1, which is unique to Cursor. It's just super fast and it works really well with Cursor. It's not the smartest model, but I love how fast it can iterate and move. Next up, I think I will use the Sonnet series quite a bit. I've been quite impressed by the new Opus 4.5 model. It's expensive though, so I'm generally just going to use that for a planning step at the start, and then I'll recruit either Composer, Haiku, or maybe Sonnet 4.5 to do a lot of the building work. But generally, in a nutshell, I'm using Composer and Claude 4.5. When it comes to design, I like to keep it as simple as possible, either light or dark mode and not too many colors. Sometimes if you're a new designer, new developer, you throw way too many colors at the interface and it's not confusing. You want to have hierarchy of color schemes so that the user knows where they need to click next. If you want to cheat at some good design, I recommend going to a site like Mangement, which has got lots of design inspiration and patterns, and also you can get color scheme ideas from Pinterest. Okay, so very important tip. Before you move on to doing anything new or build out any new features, it's always a good idea to make sure that you've committed, you've saved, or you're using a new feature branch. But the thing with Cursor is it won't know your standard until you start writing that. So write your first couple of commit messages on your project manually. It figures out how you like to commit, and then when you press this little magic commit button going forward, it will actually write it in the style that you like. So I can basically just copy this as an example here. I like this color scheme. I'm going to paste this in here to Composer. Okay, so we're about to make our little design change here. I've pasted in the image that I like, and I'm going to give it a prompt. So I have a little command here. Let's update our design using this image as inspiration. I want to copy the color scheme and font only from this design. So that last step is important because sometimes when you're pasting in designs as inspirations, it'll go and recreate all elements of the design. And we have our design set up already. We just want to use whatever you decide you like from that particular image. Now, this is actually a good time to switch over to our agents view. So again, just hit Command E for that. I'm going to hit new agent here. I'm going to paste in my prompt. We're going to drop in the image that we like. So I've copied that here from Pinterest. Now, this is an advanced power feature. You don't need to do this, but I find this really useful for getting our multiple different attempts at building out a feature. So it's called Worktrees, or best of N. I like to call it agent deathmatch. So what we do here is we click Worktree. Now we have the option to pick various different models. So I'm going to pick Composer and I'm going to pick Sonnet 4.5. What we're doing here is we have multiple models enabled. What you can also do is you can actually have Composer do 4 or 5 different versions. You could have Sonnet do different versions. You can have as many as up to 8 different versions run here. And what it's going to do is each one of these agents is going to spin up its own little sub-agent to go and have an attempt at the prompt that we're working on. So you could have multiple different versions of designs, versions of code, etc. I go deep into this in my video on Git if you want to check that out again in the description. But for now, I'll just give you the high level. So I'm just going to run this. Now, this is a perfect opportunity to show you agent steering. So oftentimes our agent will get stuck, or you'll see it going through a train of thought and realize, oh, I want to change its direction or give it an extra prompt, you can add the prompt in here and it ends up being queued. So that means it's going to wait until the agent has finished processing before it adds in the next part of the prompt. But you might want that to go straight into the process. So you just click this little button here, and now the agent has been interrupted and it's going to come out of whatever loop it was stuck in and proceed forward. So I'm going to do the same thing for Sonnet here because it had the same issue. So I just type in resume, hit return, and then force the prompt to interrupt. Okay, so it's finished working, but how do we actually view the changes that it made? So if I go up here, you can see this is the actual branch name for our work tree. So I can just click this button here and I'm going to say open terminal in Worktree. Now, not to get too complicated, I've covered this in a previous video, but what's happening here is a copy of your project is made with a Worktree, and you can experiment and make changes in that Worktree and then apply the changes back to your main branch. But you need to open up the Worktree, then type npm install and then npm run dev, and that will run the development server on a new port so you can take a look at the design changes. However, one little handy tip is if we open Control B here again to open our sidebar, look in here in our cursor directory, I have this file here called worktrees.json, and in here I've got this little piece of JSON here that says npm install and npm run dev. So depending on what your project is, you can use this little script to actually pre-set up your work trees. So if I look at my nodes that are running, you can see a command for this to see what servers you're running, or I find port manager on Mac is quite handy. It shows all the different ports that you're running, and you'll see that we've got two new node instances here, 301 and 302, and our original switch dimension app is on 3000. So if I want to view 3001, I just type that in here. So each one of these work trees ran its own server and it has its own port. And if we look at those ports, let's take a look at 3001. So this is Composer, and we know that that's it because if we click on this button here, open terminal in Worktree, we know that it's got this little tag here, see WSF and then WSF. So if you want to just check the work, you can see if I see up here, it created this Worktree WSF with the tag on the branch here. And then I just click open terminal in Worktree if I want to run the service myself, but already it's running, and you'll see here our little node server version has WSF running beside it, and then this is the port that it's on. So in my browser I'm in port 3001, so I know that we're looking at the Composer version, and this is what we got back. Now obviously this is kind of an overpowered use of using work trees. Where I would use this is if I was doing a big design change or a refactor or working on a particularly complex problem. It might be a good idea to spin up multiple different agents. But anyway, I think I like the Composer version more purely because of the difference in the background here. So I just click review here. It shows me all the changes that were made to the code. And then if I click apply here, it'll apply it back to our main directory. So it takes whatever we've done on this working tree and pushes it back to the main directory. So you can see here, if I go back to localhost 3000, our change has been merged back and those changes are added in there ready to be committed. So a new feature from Cursor is an extension of its bug bot. So if you've been using Cursor for a while, you know that when you run a pull request, you can use bugbot to do a QA review of your code. But now we have something built directly into Cursor 2.0, which is agent review, and you can turn that on via the settings here in the background. So every time you commit, it basically will go ahead and review all your code to see if it can find any kind of potential issues. So let's say here it's found this little issue and it'll give you a suggestion as to what's wrong. So here you can see it's calling out a theme conflict, and you can decide to just fix that yourself or actually just go and fix it in the chat, and it'll go straight into your Composer window and fix the problem for you. A quick word of warning, I find these kind of review tools useful, but I wouldn't rely on them completely. So I have a nice skeleton kit here in place. I've got a database attached. I've got my ORM. I've got authentication in place with Clerk. It's a great foundation for our project. But now I want to start to change up the interface and make it specific to the app that I want to build. So always a good idea to check out a new branch. So before we move on to design something new and potentially break our app, we're going to create a new branch. So I've just typed in here git checkout -b title gen design. I'm going to hit return. And what that does is it basically creates a whole new branch. If we look over here, our branch has now changed to title gen design. So now I can mess around. If I break anything, if AI breaks anything, we can always switch back to the main branch and we'll still have a working app. So my next piece of advice is use design mode. So this is a low cost, low danger way of figuring out interface design and how we want things to work together. So I use this command. Just type in here /design mode, and I've created that myself, but you can create the same. And all it needs is this little simple prompt. You can adjust it as you need, but basically we're working in design feature prototype mode. We're not going to make any changes to the database or schema. Mock data can be generated temporarily with JSON. So JSON is just like a very, very simple way of a database. It's going to have all the information needed just to make your interface look like it works. So I'm in agent mode. I'm going to open up my agent. Okay, so I'm just going to spin up a new agent here for this. I'm going to type in design mode. In this case, I'm going to pick Opus 4.5 because in my tests, it's actually been doing a great job on design. This is an expensive model. I wouldn't use it for everything, but it is good for design. Okay, so quick look at the prompt here. Generally, it's a good idea to create your prompts in the format of a user story. So I'm saying, as a creator, I want an interface where I can type in my ideas for a video concept. I'll let you pause and read the rest of this prompt if you want, but the key areas are I'm creating this as a user story, and then I'm also giving it context again as to what page I want to create. The better context you can give, the better it's going to work. I've also included my /design mode command here as well, and you can see that prompt here on the left hand side. Now, the next thing I would heavily use is Shift and tab. So this is what we call plan mode. So we don't need that in this case because we've got plan mode engaged here, and I'm just going to hit this button to run it. Okay, so we've got our little plan generated here, but it's always important to read through the plan and edit or change whatever you don't like. In this case, it's saying it's going to generate a grid. I think I'd much prefer a list, so I'm going to make that amendment here. Now, if you'd like to get multiple different options and treatments for your design, one thing I suggest you doing is using a UX designer persona. So I'll also link a video in the description. It's my 3 experts approach. And if we use the UX designer, it will actually help generate multiple different approaches to how we might do our interface design, which can be helpful to kind of get your brain thinking about what's possible. Okay, so this is the outcome of Claude 4.5. I can put in my cursor top tips or my title that I want here, generate 10 titles. So let's just try this. It's simulating a call to the server. And then we've got our title generation here. And we have the various different psychological drivers. I can copy, I can heart, and then it gets added to my favorites here. So let's add another one. Okay, cool. So that's my favorites folder. So maybe I see certain topics come up. Oh, I'd like to use that again, but not on this particular video. And then I can add to my basket here. So these are the ones that I'm considering, let's say, for the upcoming video. Now, this design is by no means perfect. So what I would do is I go back and using the Worktrees, I'd probably get GPT-5, Gemini, Composer, and Opus to work on this again to see what they might come up with. I would also step back and do that step where I said I would get the UX persona to come up with some variations of what might be possible. And then looking through maybe 4 or 5 different versions, kind of merge in the best of what I saw designed. Failing that, just draw it out on paper and then upload that as an image and have the model work on that for you. Great, hopefully these tips help. I've lots more of these in my cursor playlist on the channel. So if you thought this video was helpful, check out my video on Git for new AI developers or my video on how to design with AI and Recraft.